Hello everyone. This is my final video on Jason Reza Jorjani. At least unless he returns with something else. But anyways, all I wanted to say is that Jason Reza Jorjani has been decisively checkmated by me. Now he is an irrelevant individual. Prior to me entering into the scene, he was very prominent in the Iranian nationalist community, but now he is quite irrelevant, and that's all thanks to the efforts of me and my friends. And it was very important for us to challenge Jason, and not only because he was an enemy of Iran and Iranian culture and civilization. Yes, an enemy, not a friend, and I will highlight the reasons for that in this video, but also because he was spreading misinformation, specifically pseudo-genetic, pseudo-historical, and pseudo-cultural information in regards to Iranian civilization and history. And that's very unfortunate, but it's good that we took him on. Me, my friend Kehan the Wise Man, as well as another friend of mine, Malusak. We made a few videos challenging Jorjani, and we decisively checkmated him. After that, Jason actually didn't really respond to us, and he really went into hiding for the most part. He really didn't take any effort to respond to me. He did call me out in the middle of this year, and I replied to him. I believe it was in June, and I did make a few response videos to him. Since then, I actually haven't made any response videos to him, but this is my final video on Jason Reza Jorjani, and in this video, I'd like to highlight the reasons why this man was an enemy of Iran Shah, why he worked against Iranian interests, and why he is just an individual who is an imbecile, nothing more, nothing less than that. And the reason for that is because he has constantly humiliated not only himself but also Iranians in front of individuals such as white nationalists and Jews, Zionists specifically. I'm not really against Judaism or even Zionism, but currently Zionism is at odds with the Iranians, and Jorjani actually went on the records and stated that he was an Iranian Zionist, which is just ridiculous. But anyways, let me begin with this video right now. This video is just a recap of what me and Jason Reza Jorjani disagreed upon, and what our main disagreeing points were. And in this video, it's the ultimate and final expose of Jason Reza Jorjani. So essentially, the first major mistake Jason made was in 2016 when he became a member of the alt-right, and that was actually a huge mistake because the alt-right are not friends of Iran. They support the regime. They don't really care about the Iranian people. The majority of them think that Iranians are actually mixed with Arabs and are Arabs. Jorjani actually fed into this stereotype. He actually went on record and stated that Iranians were colonized by brown and yellow people, brown being Arabs, yellow being Mongols and Turks. But essentially this is true, but the extent of this colonization was limited. Contemporary Iranians are not Arabs or Turks. Jorjani believes that they are. Yes, he believes this. He doesn't consider contemporary Iranians to be the descendants of the ancient Iranians. Rather, what he sees is a modern Iran which is largely populated by Arabs and Turks and has no trace of its pre-Islamic past, which is not true. All genetic evidence has proven there to be 90 to 95% genetic continuity in Iran since the Iron Age. There's no doubt about this. There's no debating this point. This has been proven by science. But Jason disregarded this, and when he was in the white nationalist movement, he made a lot of mistakes. He stated that Rumi was a white European man. This is wrong. He didn't mean it phenotypically. He meant it genotypically. This is wrong. Rumi was not a white man. Rumi was South Central Asian. He would cluster closest to contemporary Tajiks from Afghanistan as well as Tajiks from Tajikistan. He was highly steppe-derived most likely, but he was nonetheless a native Iranian. He was not a white European. That was a foolish assertion by Jorjani. And then Jorjani went on to say that Iranians needed to be genetically re-engineered because of the fact that they were replaced by Arabs and Turks, which is not true. The contemporary Iranian is just as Iranian as the Sassanid Iranian and only has at most 8% foreign admixture. Yes, that's right, just 8% foreign admixture. and this is a collection of Mongol, Arab, and Turk. The influence is very limited on the Iranian gene pool, but Jorjani does not realize this because Jorjani is an idiot. He hasn't really looked at the facts. He hasn't looked at the genetic evidence that proves that there is 90 to 95% genetic continuity in Iran since the Iron Age. Furthermore, he likened ancient Iranians to Germanics, and this gives credence to the appropriation of Iranian civilization, heritage, and culture by Nordics, Germanics, Europeans. This was a foolish assertion on Jorjani's part, as all evidence again has proven there to be 90 to 95% genetic continuity in Iran since the Iron Age. Even the early Iranians, so the Medians, the Bactrians, the Sogdians, and the Persians, two of those tribes, the Medians and the Persians, did migrate into Iran, as well as the Parthians. All of these tribes, the early Iranics, were heavily steppe-derived, but nonetheless they were neither Germanics nor were they Nordics. They were South Central Asians. They clustered closest to the contemporary Yagnobi peoples, and once they arrived in Iran, they had mixed on impact except for the elite, and this is evidenced in the ancient Iranian depictions, which look just like modern Iranians. The majority of the Iranian gene pool has been stable, but Jorjani forgot about this point as well, and this was his time in the white nationalist movement. He was just LARPing on about how Iranians were white Europeans at one point. They were colonized and raped by Arabs, which is not true. The Arab colonization of Iran was limited, and most Arabs were actually expelled during the nativist uprisings, and the majority of Arab settlers were actually concentrated in Iraq, which was the former Sasanian province, as well as in Khorasan, and in the Iranian heartland there was very limited Arab settlement. No more than 50,000 to 100,000 Arabs settled in a region with a population at least more than 7 million people, up to 10 million people. And it's very unlikely for this small amount of people to replace the Iranian population easily. This is very unfortunate, but anyways, it never happened. It would have been unfortunate, but it never happened. And Jorjani placed an emphasis on this point. He spoke a lot about this in his book World State of Emergency. He spoke a lot about the ancient Aryan Imperium, which was the ancient Iranian Empire, or Iran Shah, but he never emphasized the point that this was done by native Iranians, Iranians like the Iranians of today, and not by foreign Nordic Europeans or Germanics, which is obviously not true. It's completely rubbish, and this is the main point that Jorjani went on about for a very long time, and this was my first point of contention. But eventually, in mid to late 2017, he was expelled from the white nationalist movement by Richard Spencer rather, and this expulsion resulted in him openly declaring his denunciation of white nationalism and the alt-right. And after this point, he made another huge mistake, which I will get into now. After his expulsion from the white nationalist movement, or the alt-right, Jorjani then went on to claim to be an Iranian Zionist. Yes, that's right. Jorjani actually claimed that he was an Iranian Zionist and he was in contact with the Israeli government, and they were planning to overthrow the Iranian regime. He didn't say that specifically, but he did hint it. He was very proud to be an Iranian Zionist, and unfortunately it never really worked out for him. No one really wanted him to be an Iranian Zionist. Probably even his Jewish allies dumped him after that. He didn't stick to that narrative for a very long time. He quickly abandoned it, and he did take down his blog a few times because of my efforts and the efforts of my friends. And because of us, Jorjani now is irrelevant. He has no real evidence against against any of my points. Iranians were never Germanics rather, or Nordic. That is a lie, and Iranians were never your Nordic Europeans either. But anyways, Jorjani actually emphasized this point. He emphasized the point of Scythian migrations to Iran, even though the Scythians themselves were heavily East Asian derived prior to entering Europe, and once they entered Europe they did admix with the native population, but before they entered Europe they were heavily admixed with East Asians. This is very much a crucial point here, as Jorjani believed the Scythians were Nordic Germanics, which is not true. Furthermore, after his Iranian Zionist, after that I don't really know the correct word for it, but after that whole incident, you can call it, after that whole incident or drama, Jorjani moved on, and then he proceeded to call me out in mid 2018. I replied to him and I debunked all of his ridiculous accusations against me. He called me a Pakistani liar and a lunatic. But the reality is that he was the liar and he was the lunatic. He's the one who really, really, really needs to get his act together. And, I debunked him. I challenged him again and I thoroughly debunked him. After that, he got into a bit of legal trouble with his former institute from which he was fired, mind you. Yes, Jorjani was actually fired by the NJIT for his ridiculous comments that Iranians needed to be genetically re-engineered and that racial differences among humans they do exist. He was right about that point. I actually agreed with him on that point. But for a professor to say this, it's not right. Of course, he was going to lose his job. Then I agree with some of his genetic points on race and IQ. But essentially, after he made that major claim, and after he actually was open about that, as well as praising Adolf Hitler, which was another huge mistake for a New Jersey certified professor to do. It was really ridiculous to make, rather. And after that mistake, his institute actually fired him, and that was actually a very good thing. Now he's jobless, he's irrelevant, and he's no longer a major part of the Iranian Renaissance. There's really nothing left for him to do. He's pretty much done at this point, and if he wants to debate me, he's welcome to debate me. But yeah, that's essentially it for this video. All I wanted to do was just bring him up one more time as a year in review. Georgia, my major enmity with Jorjani began in September 2017. Oh yeah, I also have one final thing to discuss. I still have to discuss why Jorjani is an enemy of Iranians and not a friend. But anyways, my rivalry with Jorjani began in September 2017 and it has continued to this point, but now it's done because my work here is done. Jorjani is now irrelevant. There's really nothing left for Jason to do or say. But yeah, that's essentially it. Now I'll just get into the part why Jorjani is actually an enemy of Iranians and not a friend. Jorjani is an enemy of Iranians because he has constantly given away Iran's heritage to Nordics, Europeans, and Germanics. He has wanted to genetically re-engineer the entire Iranian nation to Nordics, to Europeans. He wants to replace the Iranian DNA with Nordic and European DNA, which is ridiculous and really foolish on his part, as all genetic evidence has proven there to be 90 to 95% genetic continuity in Iran since the Iron Age. And finally, the final reason Jorjani is an enemy to Iranians is because he has been constantly aligning with enemies of Iran. The white nationalists are no friends of the Iranian people. They support the regime, but they don't really care about the Iranian people. And Jorjani has been an idiot for aligning with them. That's why he's an enemy of Iranians. And another reason he's an enemy of Iranians is because this man has actually gone on the record and stated that he is a Zionist. The Zionists are not friends of Iran's, they are enemies of Iran rather, and they are staunch enemies of Iran. They are opposed to any sort of Iranian nationalism or Iranian expansionism in the Middle East, and this idiot went and aligned with them. That is why he is an enemy of Iran. He is a disgrace to Iran, and this is my final video on him. My other Jorjani videos are all listed in this video in the description, and I have attached my main Jorjani videos in the top right tab, and you can watch them, you can go over them. This was a long time ago, but I thought I'd just make one final video to finally settle the Jorjani question. That's essentially it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.